Welcome to John Gets Games. This is part 2 of my post-Board Game GeekCon 2015 coverage, where I'm going over 20 different games that I liked and didn't like, but specifically were new to me at the convention that I played. I've already covered 10 games, which you may or may not have seen in the prior version, but if not, I'll let you know that this one is going to be 10 more games, and I'm going to go from the games I like the most to the games I like the least in this list, so let's jump on in. So the first game I'm going to talk about is Shakespeare. Now, I'd heard a little bit about this game going into the convention, but not enough to get me excited. The box cover looked boring, and I heard it was just a Euro where you're trying to put on a play in Shakespearean times. But once I got to the convention, a friend of mine played it before I did, and he loved it. And he said, we've got to play it, we've got to play it. Can we play it tonight? Can we play it tomorrow? When can we play this game? You're going to love it. And so I finally acquiesced, and we played it on the second or third day of the convention, and it blew me away. This game is stunning. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Once you crack open that relatively boring box cover, you have vibrant, beautifully illustrated cards all over the place, and it really gives you that vibe of putting on a play, I thought. I mean, this is still a Euro game, and you still have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, but what's going on in the game is you are going to be putting on a dress rehearsal and then a final performance, but on each turn you're going to be hiring a new person into your troupe. That might be just an extra who does pretty much nothing. That might be an actor who is going to help you, they might help sew their own costume, they might help you write the play that you are ultimately going to be performing. Now, thematically, that's what they're doing. Realistically, all they're doing is pushing a little icon up a writing track, but that still feels pretty cool. And the last type of person is a craftsman who is going to help you build the set, which is actually on your personal tableau. You assemble it building little chits that look like different colors, and you have to build it symmetrically. Or you can get seamstresses who specifically are really good at making costumes, and you put those costumes onto your actors. Now the costumes, realistically, they're just little circular chits that are colorful with numbers on them, but you can still thematically get into it and be like, I made this actress only pink, and that's just kind of fun. But what you do after that is you're going to bid on the number of actions you're going to take in a turn from 1 to 5, and you all simultaneously reveal, and the person who bid the least actions gets to go first, and then so on, so on. So the person who bids the most actions goes last. But the person who bid the least actions also gets a victory point, and victory points are very hard to come by in this game. I think the winning score was about 23 in the game we played, so that's a fascinating idea. And in fact, when I played the game, I decided I was going to use as many actions as possible. It just seemed crazy to me that that wouldn't be what everyone would want to do, maximize your action usage. So I was doing 4 to 5 actions on every single turn in the 6-turn game. But the person who ended up winning, I came in 3rd place, the person who won did probably half the number of actions I did. So obviously this game is balanced so that you should not be just maximizing your actions. You need to really think about what turns you want to do and to go big and what turns you don't want to, because every single action you do on your turn involves using one of the people in your troupe. And the important thing is that every single person you use on a turn except one is going to get exhausted, and you can't use them on that next turn. So that means if you're doing a whole bunch of actions every turn, you're exhausting almost half your people, and you can't efficiently keep using the people who are specifically better than others. So I thought that was a really fascinating idea, and I really, really enjoyed the game. It definitely blew me away. My only concern is that you use every single actor and craftsman and every card that you can draft into your tableau, you use every single one of them every single game. So the only difference is going to be the order in which those cards come out. So I worry a little bit about the replayability, but that play was so interesting, and all the different things you could focus on. You could really focus on making great costumes, or making a great set, or just putting on a really well-written play. And I think there's a lot of different variety there. I think you can get many plays out of it. I can't authoritatively say whether or not it would get stale through lack of variety sooner or later. Hopefully I'll be able to grab a copy of this and play it a bunch more, or at least play a friend's copy, because I really enjoyed this one. The next game is My Village. Now this is a kind of dicey sequel to a Euro game that came out a couple of years ago called Village. Ultimately what this is a dice pool drafting game, and I love dice pool drafting. In the game, every single turn, someone's going to roll a bunch of dice, and then going around in turn order, people are going to take 2 dice out of the pool, and they're going to add their pips together. They're standard dice going between 1 and 6, so you're going to be evaluating between a 2 and a 12 on every turn. And the cool thing here is that you're actually building little engines in your specific town. You could build different carts that are going to generate you resources, like they might get you beer, or they might get you horses. And the value on those different cards is going to be the pip value that you activate. So you might want to try and synergize so that most of your cards are all 5s, for instance. So when you evaluate a 5, you're going to be able to hit all of those. But also there are endgame scoring tiles, and there are honestly just a whole bunch of things that you're doing. But the neat thing about the game is that every action you do, almost every action in the game, costs you time. And you have a time track on your little personal tableau. And every time the marker makes it all the way around, then the Grim Reaper is going to attack, and you're going to have to kill somebody in your village. And I think you have a maximum of, I think, 5 people in your village. So people are going to be dying. And that means you're going to need to make new people. So you train new people in a school and put them back out again. Thematically, that's what's going on. It's definitely a Euro-style game, even though there are dice in it. You're choosing those dice, and you can also spend money to modify the dice back and forth. It's got a lot of really cool things going on, and it really scratched that pool drafting itch that I like so much. I really enjoyed playing this game and really managing the amount of time that was going on as your person went all the way around to the different tracks on your boards, and just figuring out how to get victory points in different ways. You could go on a bunch of adventures, or you could just make a bunch of goods and sell them to people in the town. I think with the teach, and for a new game for all 3 of us, it took an hour and a half. So I definitely liked the playtime of the game. I really enjoyed this one. I would like to play this one more, but my only concern is, once again, what I just said for Shakespeare, in that you see everything every game. There are endgame scoring cards in a couple different ways, and there are only the ones that you put in the game. You don't choose 4 out of 8 or anything like that. It's always going to be the same. So once again, I think there's probably several games worth of variety in there. I worry maybe like 4 or 5 games in, you might think, well, it's just the same thing. I've done all of these strategies already. So I worry a little bit about that, but I didn't mention this with Shakespeare, but with both these games, that's very easily expandable, and I definitely don't think it's a problem for those first several games, and I would definitely like to play this one many times more. Next up is the Prodigals Club, and this is a goofy game. It's a thematic sequel to a game that came out a couple years ago called M.U.L.E, and it's got the same kind of thing going on as that game, where you're just trying to lose stuff as efficiently as possible. In the Prodigals Club, there are 3 different types of things you're losing. You're trying to do the worst at an election. There's a political election, and you're trying to do really, really badly and get like as close to 0 votes as you can. There is a high society area where you can go out to eat with all these fancy people and try to offend as many of them as you can. And finally, there's just your assets, your money. You're trying to lose money as fast as you can. And at the end of the game, what you do is you see who did the best on average for all 3 of these things. So who had the lowest high score, and that person wins. So you have to focus on all 3 of them at the same time. When we played it, we didn't use the money module. The rules suggested just doing 2 modules for the first game because there's a lot going on, and we followed that, and I'm glad we did. So we just did the election and the reputation, and man, this is a really solid Euro game that has great thematic content to it, because you have little mini games going all over the place. With Reputation, there is a little board where you have these 2 men and 2 women, and they can kind of zigzag down the track, going straight down or side to side. And all the way down are little icons which can let you activate things better. If you leave a person on the little carriage icon, then whenever you activate your drunken carriage driver, you're going to lose even more reputation because people don't like that. Or when they're in a certain spot, you might activate the fact that that person now has dogs, and you can spend a lot of money with your dogs. And there's just a whole bunch of little mini games going on in this game. I called it a plate spinning game because it seems like you're trying to spin a bunch of plates, and you want to make sure that you give equal attention to everything because there's all these little things going on, but they all work so well. And then you're also laughing like the whole time you're playing because of the ridiculous things that you're trying to do. You're just trying to hire a drunken guy to get up on a loudspeaker and talk about how terrible you are, or maybe how good you are terribly, something like that. And then probably the funniest part is there is Aunt Beatrice who wants to talk about how great you are every game, so you have to offend her in some way or just kind of dodge her advances so that people don't actually think you're good. You don't want people to like you, and one of my favorite actions is literally just going on the spot and ignoring Aunt Beatrice's help because I guess you fart in her direction or you say something really offensive to her. This is a really odd game that works very well, and it's also very strategic, very thinky. I really enjoyed it, and next time I play it, I hope to do all 3 modules. I think it's very likely that there's going to be a copy of this in my local friend group because it seemed like pretty much all of us played the game and all of us were really blown away by it. It's a really solid game, and I think if you enjoy Last Will, you will most likely like this one because it's actually a more strategic, thinky game because there's no randomness at all in this game versus Drawing Blind and Last Will. So I highly recommend this one. I hope to play it again. Now we've got Tiny Epic Western, and I ended up playing this one twice at the convention. Once before the convention actually started with some publishers, and then I played it later on with a couple of my really good friends. And this is a neat game. I didn't know anything going into it beyond the fact that it's a Tiny Epic game, and I've got Tiny Epic Kingdoms and Galaxies up here, and they do various different mechanisms in small boxes, and I've been pretty impressed with them so far. So what's going on in this game is it is a worker placement game, with a pseudo-poker aspect going on. There is a very tiny deck of cards. It's 4 suits, and they go from 1 to 5. And on every single turn, you're going to be drawing a couple cards and choosing one of those cards and discarding the other one. And on the playing board, you have different hub stations with cards that are randomly put between those stations. And when you're going to put your workers down on those different hubs, you're going to activate different things to get various resources like gold or law enforcement. But the really cool thing is that after everybody's placed all their workers, you check to see who has the best poker hand in each of those areas by comparing. So you have your little hub here and you have a card next to it on both sides that's randomly done out in the area. You look at your card that you have hidden and you try to make the best poker hand with your card and the other 2 cards, so a 3-card hand. And the person who has the best hand gets to evaluate a bonus for that section. It might mean getting more resources, or it might mean getting more people on the next turn. So there's quite a bit to think about with the resources you want to grab right now. Also, you want to put your people into zones where you have the highest chance of winning that poker hand at the end of the game. Also, there is a dueling aspect where if somebody goes in the spot that you want, you can go there as well, and then you roll these bullet dice. They're actually molded like dice, and you roll them, they're d6s. That might seem a bit random, and it kind of is, but there's stuff you can do to mitigate it. You can spend a resource to re-roll the die. You can also reveal that hidden card that you have in front of you and add that value to the bullet. So it might incentivize you, if you want to attack people, to keep a really high card like a 5, but you might want to keep that 1 because there's 2 1s on the board already, and that'll make a triple, and the triple is really, really strong. So there's a whole bunch of things to keep in mind as you're playing, and then ultimately you're going to spend these resources on building buildings into your own little tableau, which everybody can access in kind of a Le Havre style way where you own it. And if somebody goes there, then you are going to get goods for that, and then they're going to get the benefit for it, but also you just get straight up victory points. So there's a whole bunch of things going on here, and a really neat thing about the game is I played it at the beginning of the convention, and we actually discussed it for about 45 minutes afterwards, and they ended up making a couple tweaks based off of the feedback that we gave and other people did throughout the convention, because the game is still in development. It's going to be going on Kickstarter in early January, and I could tell that the game is like 95% there. They're just doing tiny tweaks up and down, and just being able to play it twice, I could already see that it got better from one play to the next, and I look forward to playing this one again. I think it's a really solid, thinky game, probably the thinkiest of the Tiny Epic games so far, so definitely a thumbs up for me. Alright, now let's talk about automobiles. This was also on my list of games I was very excited to play at the convention, and so I was glad I got to play it. I did a 3-player game of it with 2 of my best friends, and we had fun. We really enjoyed it. The idea of this game is it's an incredibly streamlined bag builder where you are acquiring cubes, throwing them into a bag, shuffling them up, and pulling them out. And once you pull your whole bag out, you put a whole bunch back in. So it has that deck building vibe, but they're just little cubes. And the cool thing is that when you play, each time you play, the cubes will do different things. So a green cube might let you get rid of a lot of wear and tear to your car in this game, but in the next game it might let you go really fast. So there's going to be variability, quite a bit of variability game to game, because I think there's like 4 or 5 different cards per cube, so that's quite a bit. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is use these cubes to zoom around a track a certain number of times and hit the finish line first. I ended up winning the game by a mile. Like, I think I almost lapped the, the 3rd place person in this game. We all enjoyed it, but we played a 3-lap game. I wonder how balanced it is. Maybe not balanced. Maybe there's just a runaway leader type thing. Maybe I just built my bag better than my opponents did. But man, I just ran away with it. Like, I literally came like 2 spaces from lapping them. We all enjoyed it because it was a quick game, and I would like to play this game again, specifically because of the different variety every time you play and the fact that you can just jump right in and start racing around a track. But wow, it seemed a little bit swingy. But that being said, in the first lap, I was so far behind, and I ended up winning by a mile. So I'm not really sure where I land on that. All I know is I enjoyed it. The mechanics were cool. I want to explore this one quite a bit more. So now let's talk about Porta Nigra. I went into the convention hearing a little bit about this game. I knew it was a relatively good Euro game about area majority from some famous designers. None of that really excited me, but a good friend of mine said that it was the best game we played at the convention so far, so I went out of my way to give it a play, and I enjoyed it. I actually won by a relatively reasonable amount, but let's talk about a couple different things. The first thing that I loved about this game was the way you evaluate your turn. You have a deck of 7 or 8 cards, and on a turn, you're going to have 2 of them in your hand. You're going to choose one of those 2 cards and evaluate it, and then at the end of your turn, you're going to draw another one. You're going to end up going through every single card in your deck. You're going to use every card twice. In each game, you're going to cycle twice. But when you evaluate that card, it's going to tell you how many actions you get, and that number is going to be less than the number of options that are on that card. It might say gain a torch, or buy any brick of your choice, or buy a red brick, or build a building. You might have 5 different options, but you can only evaluate 3 of them. And so that's a great decision. You're sitting there and you're thinking, what do I need right now? And you have a set number of each of these actions you could possibly do because you're going to go through that deck twice in the game, so you're not going to magically create new stuff. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're buying these bricks and you're putting them out on the board in a pretty cool fashion, building these little towers all over the place and putting your colored meeples on top. Every single one of these towers is vying for an area majority of, not area majority, just a majority in some fashion. Some are a majority for the row, some are a majority for the height, some are the majority for just the entire zone. It's just a majority fest. And that part I'm not crazy about. I don't like majority style games in general, and that was definitely where this game was going. In fact, almost all the points you get for this game evaluate at the very end. Some majority games you get points as you're going, and that's cool. In this one, it's lump sum all at the end, and I ended up winning, and I enjoyed it. I would play it again if somebody said, I have Porta Nigra, I really want to play it. And I'd be like, ah, sure, I'll play it again. But ultimately, the awesome action selection mechanism was not enough to sway me away from the relatively dull gameplay of majority in general. But that's more me than other people. I think if you like majority stuff, you might really like this game. In fact, that friend who said it was his favorite game of the convention doesn't like majority games in general for himself as well. So I think it's a very solid game. It didn't really catch me too much. Next up is M.U.L.E. Now, this game is all about buying low and selling high for a bunch of different commodities on a foreign planet. What you're going to be doing is actually generating these commodities in a kind of a cool fashion. You're going to be drafting tiles from a central tableau, putting them onto your little area, and then putting little mules on them, which are supposedly electronic mining machines, but they actually look like mules. It's got a very fun, lighthearted art style to the whole game. And you're going to be mining ore, you're going to be mining crystals, and you're getting food and energy. And at the end of every turn, you're going to be selling some or buying some, and based off of that market, if people are overly selling, well then the price is going to drop, or if lots of people want to buy, the price is going to go up. And ultimately, it's a buy low, sell high game. And it seemed like a very streamlined, well-done version of that, with a very odd amount of randomness thrown on top, because at the end of every turn, before you evaluate all those different markets, something is going to happen that might just flip over a card and say, guess what? You don't produce any ore this turn. Nobody does. Or everybody loses all of their stored crystals. And you have no way to plan for that. So it seemed very random. And I guess the idea is that it's thematic because this game is kind of based off of a video game from the 80s. But ultimately, I didn't like how random that felt. And there's a variant in the back of the book where it says you can reveal those cards early so you can plan your turn around them. And I think if I played M.U.L.E. again, I would definitely play with that variant. There's also this thing at the end of every turn where the person who has the most money has to give a beneficial card to the person, to somebody else. They have the most money, that means they're winning. They draw a card that might say gain some money, and they have to give it to somebody. But then that person has to draw a bad card and give it to somebody else, which is usually the person who's in the lead. It's a very weird thing. I like the catch-up mechanic of drawing a good card and giving it to somebody. I did not like the bad thing that that person is going to give to somebody else, because usually it was just like they lose 15 bucks or they lose $5. It was an odd thing. It seemed like they're overly trying to sell this goofy theme on top of what was a pretty solid Euro-y buy low sell high mechanism. Ultimately, I am terrible at buy low sell high games for some reason. I actually have a bachelor's degree in economics, and that does not help me out in the slightest for these kind of games. I came dead last. I think I had half the score of the third place player. But I still had fun because it's just a lighthearted, silly game of just selling things back and forth. I mean, it looks lighthearted and silly, but it's got a great backbone. Ultimately, everyone around the table enjoyed it in general. I think a couple people really liked it. I would totally play this one again if somebody was to acquire it in my gaming group. It's a pretty solid game, but I definitely think that using the variants to reduce the randomness is something that most people are going to want to do, because those random events are pretty nasty. The second to last game I'm going to cover is Dragonflame. Now, I was excited about playing this game. In fact, I even talked about it in my pre-Board Game GeekCon vlog, and so I ended up playing it, and I liked it. It was okay. What's going on in this game is every turn you have a certain number of cards in your hand. Well, it's always 3, actually. And what you're going to do in turn order is put them either face down or face up into different columns. And once everybody's put their 3 cards out, then in turn order, people are going to be taking all the goods in the column. So there is a hidden aspect. You can see some things are face up, some things are face down. And in fact, the earlier you are in turn order, the more face up cards you have to put. The later you are in turn order, the more face down. So you can kind of try to hide bad things or hide good things, and you hope that one of the earlier people are going to take one of those bad things and really hurt their score, or that you can kind of slide a really good card into a spot that nobody suspects and cash out on that because you are going later in the turn order. What you're also doing is there's Dragonflame cards in the deck that let you put little tokens down onto this village that have really punny, funny titles like Scorchville and Ashton and that kind of stuff. But what you're doing is just area majority in these spots. The person who burns a village more than other people is going to get points, but you only get points if the village completely burns down. So there are villages that burn really quickly, and there's villages that need a lot of flame to die, and there's a little bit of a choice you have to make there. Ultimately, I think the biggest problem I had with this game is we played it after our brains were fried from a really long game, and that we didn't enjoy very much, which I'm about to cover. And so our brains really weren't in the right space for playing Dragonflame. I think it is a solid game. I didn't really see any particular problems with it. It didn't jump out and smack me in the face with awesomeness. I would definitely play this one again. I don't know if I'm interested in acquiring it. I also don't know if it's better than Colorado. I mentioned earlier in my Excited video that it seemed like Colorado Plus, where you have this idea of putting cards into incentivization stacks and then knowing when to back out and just take the stack. Colorado is so simple and elegant and brilliant. This one seemed simple and good, but not exactly elegant or brilliant. So ultimately, I think it's a pretty solid game. I wouldn't mind playing it again in the future, but it did not grab me as much as I'd hope it would. And now for the final game I'm going to cover from BoardGameGeekCon, and as you could have guessed, this is the one I just talked about, finishing right before we played Dragonflame, and that is Grand Austria Hotel. I was very excited to play this game. It is another dice pool drafting game where a bunch of dice are rolled at the beginning of a turn, and then people are going to choose those dice and evaluate actions from a diminishing pool. And you are building a little engine, you're serving customers, you're filling in your little hotel tableaus in front of you. It looked like it has a whole bunch of awesome stuff going on that I really thought I was going to like, but there is a humongous problem with this game, and that is that they should not have put 4 players on the box when they printed this game. We played a 4-player game not really knowing, we forgot to check Board Game Geek and see what the recommended values were. We just had 4 people. I was excited to play the game. We sat down and played it, and it took over 3 hours with crushing downtime. And the reason for that is because it has a snake action system where you're going to take 2 actions on every turn. However, if you're the first player, then you take an action, and then it goes clockwise around the table until the person just to your right, they take 2 actions, and then it comes back. So if you're that first player, you take an action, and then you can just leave the table for like 15 or 20 minutes, it seemed like, because there's so much little fiddly things that you're doing on your turn, and the fact that all those people are going to take 2 turns before you take another turn, oh my gosh, it was a bit crazy making, to be honest. And if you add on to the fact that I had a very lackluster first turn, and I will blame myself for this, I thought that there are these engine building cards that you can put into your tableau. They cost money, and money is very hard to come by in this game. And I spent almost all my money on a card that I thought was going to be really good for me, and it ended up being really not good for me, and I had no money, so I really felt like I was behind already. And then the fact that I was so far behind for like a 3-hour game with humongous downtime really got into me, and I actively did not enjoy this game. It's funny, an hour into the game I was like, this game is really cool, but the downtime's kind of a problem. 2 hours into the game I was like, I don't know if this game is worth the downtime. 3 hours in I was like, I want to be done with this game. I'm just so bored and annoyed at it. And so the reason the turns take so long is because there's all sorts of little fussy things that you're going to be doing. You're going to be potentially grabbing new people to put in your cafe, and each of these people is going to want to eat or drink different things like coffee or strudel or wine, and you're going to be activating different things to get those resources. Then you're spending money in order to feed those different people. When you evaluate those people, you fill them into a room, and then they have special actions which might let you get new people or go up on certain tracks or get a discount to do something else. So you might be drawing new cards with a discount to purchase one of those people, but you're looking at the other cards in your hand, and there's so many things to do. And when every single person is doing this for every individual action, and then you're doing a snake system, it's just too much. I feel like this game is probably really good with 2 players. It's probably pretty good with 3, but do not ever play this game with 4 players. It was a nightmare. It was way too long, and it sapped all of our energy. Honestly, it was, I was really surprised at how unhappy I was at the end of this game, and it's a shame because it looks like a really cool design. I feel like there's just one too many things going on. I'm not sure what that one too many things is, but there is. It just makes the turns too long, and I've talked about it enough. That's my opinion. I think it's probably a good game with lower player counts, but with 4, it was terrible, and I don't know if I'll play it again because I had such a poor experience with it that first time. All right, well that wraps up my coverage for Board Game GeekCon. It was really great playing all these different games. It was amazing playing games for just 5 days straight for like 15 to 18 hours a day. Just it'd be a little bit too much of a good thing. I was definitely pretty wiped out at the end, but I'm looking forward to going again next year. It's just a great experience playing all these games. It seems like there's some really good stuff out there. Many of these games I played and talked about, I would love to have in my collection and play a bunch more times. So just good stuff all around. And also a couple people came up to me and said hi, so they liked the channel at the convention, which really made my day every time that happened. If you like the channel and you like to see more videos like this and also reviews and playthroughs that I do, please consider subscribing to the channel. And also, you can directly support the channel at patreon.com/JonGetsGames. Thanks for watching.